Well, despite the fact that the Denver Broncos lost a gut-wrenching, heartbreaking game on primetime against the Detroit Lions, there is so much hope and so much great news we got to share. We're going to break all that down and so much more in this video. If you're new to this channel, what's up? I'm Ben. I break down all things Broncos sports, and we have a lot to get into. So before I do that, the first thing my wife said this morning is, Ben, why do you do this to yourself? And I'm like, do what to myself? And she's like, why do you let yourself hope and then have your heart ripped out from your chest when you lose? And so I need y'all to help me. Drop in the channel, do the high points of winning 3 Super Bowls in my lifetime, winning an NBA championship. Do those make up for the heartbreaking loss to the Seahawks in the Super Bowl? The Tebow getting just embarrassed on the road in New England, just those low points as a fan. Do the high points of getting to the mountaintop make up for these low points of losing? So diving into the great news of the day, and I think there's a lot of it, and I'm going to go through. But I think if you look objectively at this season, when the schedule was released, we looked at 3 road games in a row in December. That's almost unheard of. 538 had an article about that, and just the fact that very, very few teams in the NFL, they just like screw over by giving them 3 road games in December. Think of how busy you are right now as the season is ramping up and there's all the holiday stuff. And then imagine just being out of town for every single weekend in December almost. And that's what's happened to the Broncos. If you're trying to build a narrative that the NFL hates Sean Payton, you could look at that goal line where we scored 3 times and it was called back bogusly 3 times, and you can look at the fact that the NFL gave us 3 road games in December. So objectively, I didn't expect to win this game. It was just like me being greedy and me being way too hopeful that we were gonna win. And we know we don't need this game. We did not need that game against the Detroit Lions. The frustrating part is that if we continue to play like that, we're not going to win out our final 3 games. But we need to segment that, silo that out, and just look at that for what it was. It was one bad game. We are still 6-2 over our last 8, and the Detroit Lions weren't even one of the better teams. That was the only game we have not looked competitive in our last 8 games. And if you go before that, we could have won the game on the road on a Thursday night in Kansas City. And so we are still in this. We're still very, very much alive. So let's start filling this thing out. Here's our New York Times playoff predictor. I also have up a playoff machine to show you a couple scenarios that play out there. So Denver Broncos lost last night to the Detroit Lions, and our guts are ripped out. Still, we are at a 30% chance of making the playoffs. So I want to show this quickly. Boom. If we win out our final 3 games, we have a 92% chance of making the playoffs. Now, there are a couple things that can happen and need to happen for us to not make that a 92% chance, but to make that a 100% chance. So here is, as a Broncos fan, how you need to be rooting for teams moving forward. So one of the big ones is, let's root today for Joe Flacco to go and lose to the Chicago Bears. Chicago is kind of peaking. They just beat this Lions team that we lost to, and they beat them pretty handily, and they really could have beat them earlier in the season too. So I think let's root for Chicago to beat Joe Flacco and the Browns. That would be a great thing. It also would be a great thing. There are a lot of former Broncos quarterbacks who are actually starting in the league today. So let's root against all of them. So the next one on that is the Case Keenum, or as John Elway called him, Case Keesum, is going out and playing against the Tennessee Titans. And he is the new starting quarterback because CJ Stroud is out. So if the Titans win and the Bears win, we're looking at 1 week, we go back up now here, and we have a 97% chance of making the playoffs if both of those things happen. We know that the Browns lose the tiebreaker to us because we beat them in the head-to-head. Houston would win the tiebreaker with us, but Houston last week of the game plays the Colts. And so if we can get Houston getting a loss now, then obviously we want to cheer for the Colts at the end. We'll go through that as well. So another thing that could help would be the AFC West isn't out of the question. We just now need the Chiefs to lose 2 games, and I think that is more unlikely than it is likely. Other thing we are going to want to cheer for is we know the Buffalo Bills are kind of peaking and their momentum is going the wrong direction if you're a Broncos fan. We win the head-to-head tiebreaker with him, but they are now a game up on us because of our loss last night. So let's also cheer for the Dallas Cowboys tonight against the Buffalo Bills. And if just those things happen this week, we're up at a 98% chance of making the playoffs with winning out. So looking here, I love looking at this. This is the ESPN's NFL playoff machine, and I'll clear it again so we can kind of do this all from scratch. Truly, yesterday it would have been amazing if somehow we could have had the Vikings hang on and beat the Bengals. That would have helped us quite a bit, but we lost. Obviously, let's put in some of those things that I had just talked about. So Bears beating the Browns this week, Cowboys beating the Bills this week, and then let's go to next week, and we're going to go with a Denver Broncos next week. Denver Broncos are going against, on Christmas Eve, Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. And we're going to our week after that. We know we have a Chargers team that we hope do not have a dead cat bounce. And we are going to beat the Chargers. And then we are going to go to Las Vegas, our last road game of the year. And we are going to beat the Raiders. So if you look at that, just like I had mentioned, if that happens, boom, we are in the 5 seed. So the things that could kind of hurt us would be if all of a sudden we see the Browns win out, and I'm switching that to Browns victories. You see that's knocking us back. And the other thing that could really hurt us would be Colts winning out. So Colts, Browns, Bills all win out. We're out of the playoffs. We're looking in. But as long as they beat each other up, lose a couple games in there, we should be good. I think the other great piece of news that came out of yesterday is that injury-wise, we're good. We saw McGlinchey go out, and I was nervous. The announcer talked about how this is one of the few offensive lines in the league that they've all started for every single game. That looks to continue next week against Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots. We saw Jerry Jeudy go get hurt and get evaluated, but came back into the game. Jerry Jeudy is another huge bright spot of this game. I think the fact that he is contributing to it. He's playing over the middle. That first zone read to him for 40-something yards was beautiful, a thing of beauty. Marvin Mims hitting his stride, not just as a returner, but you see him in there as a running back. You see him in there as a great receiver, so I think that was great. Then the last thing is, one of my fears was that our defensive turnaround had been so apparent that it seemed as if Vance Joseph was going to be a head coach somewhere else in the NFL. And I would love to just see what kind of consistency we could have if we had Sean Payton and Vance Joseph and some good draft picks next year. What could we do? And now I think the chances of Vance Joseph getting a head coaching job somewhere else are probably not that high. So I know that's a weird way to look at it. But I think the good news of playing so bad and just getting run all over and getting run out of town, I think the good news is you've given up 42 points and 70 points, and hopefully the rest of the NFL kind of looks past him and we get to keep Vance Joseph in the orange and blue, the 303, the Denver for a while longer. So we'll definitely be keeping you updated this week as to the news, the happenings in the NFL and the playoff standings, but do not lose heart, Broncos country. I truly believe we are still going to make the playoffs, and with this defense, if they can turn it back around and look like they did in most of these past 8 games, I feel pretty good about our chances at making a playoff run. So, Broncos country, thanks for being along with me, and let's ride.